Welcome to Jets Radio with Mike O'Connor and Joe Caporoso from TurnOnTheJets.com.
Everywhere, I used to cop in Harlem. All of my Dominicanos right there up on Broadway. Brought me back to that McDonald's, took it to my stash spot, 560 State Street. Catch me in the kitchen like a Simmons whipping pastry.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to episode 4 of Turn on the JetsCentral Radio. If we sound that much clearer, it is because we have finally upgraded to our headset and to Skype. No more over the cell phone. We heard some of your requests about the volume level, and we are happy to have that issue fixed. I am Joe Caporoso. I'm going to be hosting the show by myself tonight. My trusted co-host Mike O'Connor is out in enemy territory with his family in Nantucket for the weekend. He is going to call in on the back end of the show, though. Just talk to us for about 5-10 minutes about his most recent article on the site. Also tonight, we're going to have Mike Nolan of TurnOnTheJets.com. Mike is actually one of my good friends as well. We've worked together throughout college, and now happy to have him on the site. He's does a lot of our film analysis, breaks down the offensive line, has a good understanding Marty Morningway's offense. He is a diehard Philadelphia Eagles fan and did spend some time working at NFL Films and NBC Sports. So has some really good knowledge to share with us on the offensive side of the football. And then finally, we also are going to be talking to Conor Orr of the Newark Star-Ledger, my North Jersey hometown paper, one of our favorite beat writers for the New York Jets. So we're looking forward to that as well. So it should be a full show. We've had a busy couple days here at the site, and, we'll go through some of those articles. And then also at the back end, I got a few questions in from a few followers on Twitter that we'll address. Still feel free to send them in at Turn the Jets over the next 10-15 minutes. I'm going to answer them at the back end of the show.
What's going on, Jet Nation? You're listening to Antonio Garay, defensive line, New York Jets, and you're listening to Turn on the Jets, Central Radio, baby. Be good all day.
All right. Our first guest tonight is actually going to be our co-host, who is not able to do his normal routine with us this week because he is actually on vacation, but is so dedicated that he has escaped from his family's lavish, luxurious house up in Nantucket to give us 10 minutes of his time to talk about his most recent article. Mike, how's the trip going?
It's all right, John. I'm glad that I can at least make a little bit of the show tonight.
Absolutely. We want to keep the momentum rolling. We're on 4 straight episodes here. We don't want to break the streak. Right into it. You had an article a few days ago on the site where you talked about the safety position and took a wider lens look at it, where you looked at how it's developed under Rex Ryan the past few years, and if Antonio Allen and Josh Bush and DeJuan Landry as kind of a three-headed monster were a strong fit for the Jets defense this year. What are some of your preliminary thoughts about how the Jets safety position looks this year, and how it compares to other years under Rex Ryan?
Well, I have to say at first, it's kind of limited this year because I think, like I said in my article, I'm not sure how many people gave it a read, but like I said, I kind of said that it kind of fits the mold back in 2009 when Rex Ryan coached the team. He had Kerry Rhodes, who, of course, obviously they didn't get along too well. But Kerry Rhodes is so athletic, he could play the primary free safety position, while Jim Leonard was still pretty much in his prime of strong safety, and they could let Eric Smith play his in-the-box, blitzing, run support safety role. And that really worked for them, as we saw in number 1 defense that year. And then he kind of strayed away and let Rhodes go, which was okay. But then he just expected way too much of Smith in a primary free safety role for the next 2 years. And obviously, most Jet fans would know that Smith didn't exactly flourish. I mean, he can do what he does, which is play the run, kind of play some zone, but he can't really pick up tight ends or slot receivers for that matter, as we all saw. But so I think he's kind of Rex is getting back on track here. And even though, let's get this straight, it's a 6th-round pick and a 7th-round pick that are going to be playing significant time. So that's what I'm saying. It's limited, but I think it's at least on the right path. Allen was a strong safety in college, and that's after a change from a linebacker position. We kind of totally fit Smith's role, which is kind of a rangy linebacker in the box for the most part. And Bush was a corner in college until he switched to more free safety. He's excellent in man coverage. He can play in the slot. He can press a little bit. He can turn his hips well. So I think he can play in an excellent free safety role. Of course, we don't know that much of him. We haven't seen that much of him or Allen for that matter. And, I don't know as much about DeJuan Landry. I just know as much as the next Jet fan does. I know he was a sturdy defender in Jacksonville. He can play in the box. He can cover a little bit. He's good in zone. He's not so great in man-to-man because he doesn't have the excellent speed. But I just think that it's kind of on track for the future, the Jets safety position. While it might not exceed this year, I mean, it might not totally surprise Jet fans, or at least I'm not thinking. I'm hoping so. But at least it's on track, and we'll see what happens in the future. At least on track.
Yeah, I mean, I think both of them are intriguing players. I think, like you referred to, it's interesting because Bush almost has the skill set more of a cornerback, and he's playing safety, while Allen almost has the skill set more of an outside linebacker while he's playing safety. So, really almost if you combine them, they'd make a solid all-around starting safety, whereas I think the Jets are going to basically almost platoon it. I mean, I think they're obviously going to play more towards Bush coverage skills, and I think he'll be the de facto starter, but even if Allen's not the starter per se, there's going to be a role for him on this defense. I see him, maybe playing a role similar to what James Ahedebo did a few years ago, except maybe hopefully being on the field even a little more. A guy who could come off the edge as a pass rusher, a guy who could step up and run support. I definitely think there's some value there for him, and he flashed as a rookie at times last year. Real quick, I know your next upcoming article that we talked about is that you want to focus on a couple different veterans who you think could be on the roster bubble. Who are, 2 or 3 names that kind of jump off the page to you when you're thinking about putting that article together?
Well, I'm thinking of actually making a couple risky picks just for a little shock factor. I mean, you never know what happens. But the obvious guys, of course, are Joe McKnight and Vladimir DeCassi. Those guys just jump out to me. And guys like Calvin Pace, who, I mean, we've seen get cut before. Rex could always just say, oh, they're not doing a job for me because they're veterans. Guys like Calvin Pace kind of fit that bill. Or I'm trying to think here, guys like Caleb Schlotteroff, but I mean, that's not much of a shocker. But let's focus on Joe McKnight, because I know a lot of Jets fans actually still want him to step up. I know Conor Rogers wrote an article on Turn on the Jets for kind of expressing McKnight's new role. So I know a lot of people love the guy, but I just haven't seen it from him personally. I mean, none of us have seen that much. And at this point, with 3 solid running backs on the roster, I mean, it's a better 3-headed running attack than we've seen in quite some time, because usually we've seen 2 feature backs. I really just don't see the purpose of keeping McKnight around. I mean, as a Jets fan, I think we all know more than anybody how replaceable kick returners are. We've seen Brad Smith do it successfully. Washington was a stud back there, and now McKnight. And I think he's replaceable personally. And I kind of think he's overrated as a kick returner anyways. He kind of just relies on speed and doesn't have the vision. So I don't see him getting much of a role in the offense personally. So I think he's a possible cut. I'm kind of depending on him being cut. I kind of see that happening personally. But about DeCassi, I just don't think, of course, he's caught on. He still doesn't get that much playing time. He could be cut too. And I think as we talked about on the show, Jeff Cumberland could be a surprising cut as well. I'm hoping for a breakout year from him, but if they don't see much in training camp, I wouldn't be surprised to see him cut either.
Yeah, I think DeCoste, I'm definitely on the same page with you as that, because if you look at what the Jets did this offseason, they brought in Willie Colon, they brought in Steven Peterman, they drafted Brian Winters, and they drafted William Campbell in the later rounds. You don't add 4 guards onto your roster if you're confident in DeCoste. And, from what we've heard, DeCoste is actually taking some reps at right tackle throughout OTAs and minicamp. I just don't see with this new regime where he really fits into the mix, because I think, my guess is that Cologne and Winters are going to be the opening day starters at guard. They're going to keep Peterman as a swing backup. They're going to keep Ibushi and probably on the active roster, and then William Campbell probably on the practice squad. And then behind that, you also probably have a guy like, Schlotteroff, or maybe one of the other undrafted free agents like Dalton Freeman, who could back up at center. So, where does DeCoste really fit in that? With McKnight, I was a little more bullish on him not making the roster earlier in the year. I agree with you. Kick returners are a dime a dozen, particularly in the Jets system. Very replaceable part there. I just wonder with Goodson's legal situation if they'll hold on to a 4th halfback, and with how thin they are at receiver and how Holmes isn't healthy yet, Hill isn't healthy yet. Maybe they say, hey, we don't have that many playmakers, so we really can't afford to be cutting a guy like McKnight, who might be able to split out and play receiver, while contributing a running back. I don't see him as having a major role in the offense. I think he's best served as being almost a flex or a situational player who has a limited number of plays designed for him where he contributes a more of a specialty role. I think an article I wrote a couple of days ago is that Bilal Powell really projects as being the top backup because he's a guy who could back up Chris Ivy and run the ball inside and back up Mike Goodson as a third down back because he can handle the pass protection and catching the ball out of the backfield. With Cumberland, it's an idea we've kind of kicked around here where if Winslow goes out and plays very well in camp and Rulin locks down the kind of de facto blocking tight end job, where does Cumberland's role in this team end up being? Because you figure they'll probably keep Hayden Smith as a long-term project, and they have a couple of promising undrafted free agents. So it will be interesting to see. I mean, I would still bet on Cumberland being on the final roster, but crazier things have happened. We're gonna take it over now to Conor Orr of the Star Ledger, but definitely thanks for stopping on, Mike, and we'll be back to our normal routine next week when we have you back in the host chair with me.
Oh, yeah, sounds good, guys. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. All right, I believe that we are ready to hop right into talking to Conor Orr of the Star Ledger. Conor, are you there?
Yes, sir. How's it going?
I'm doing good. Thanks for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
Anytime. What's going on?
I got to ask you real quick. Are you a North Jersey guy as well, like me?
I'm North Jersey transplanted. I moved here when I got the job. I'm originally a Pennsylvania guy, so I'm still getting used to the lifestyle here a little bit.
All right. Hey, I went to college in Pennsylvania. I had nothing but love for Pennsylvania at this point. But Star Ledger, one of our favorite papers to follow, and following Jenny Varentes, who I think is going to be working for Peter King's site this upcoming season. It's always been a great job in the Jets beat. We've enjoyed following your work there. So just a couple quick questions about what you saw at OTAs and minicamp. What was the vibe you kind of got around the team and around the building about the quarterback situation? Did it kind of mirror what Nick Mangold was saying, where most of the guys are more confident with Sanchez since he's a veteran, or did it mirror some of the anonymous reports we heard where everybody's kind of fed up with Sanchez and ready to hand the reins off to somebody else?
Well, I definitely didn't get the vibe that they're ready to, or that they're sick of Sanchez. They don't like Sanchez. I've been around locker rooms for a long time. I've played. I've been in locker rooms. I mean, I know when somebody doesn't like somebody, and that's definitely not the case with Mark. I mean, he's still, messing around with the guys. He still talks to everybody, and I even, Mark and I were talking the other day, right before lunch, and it wasn't like a regular media period, so they didn't have to put on a show for reporters or anything. And I saw everybody coming over and joking with him, saying hi, talking to him. So I really think that there's still a good chance that he can make this his team, and I think that he's definitely still got plenty of friends in the locker room.
Yeah, I always found it kind of interesting when people or certain fans or certain people are hypercritical of him, because I always got the vibe, and I had always heard that he was well liked around the locker room. He's a good guy. He doesn't have this kind of aloof, not hardworking reputation around the team that some people seem to want to pin on him, maybe just because of where he's from and how he looks.
Yeah, and that's a really easy thing to do. If you're trying to get, if you're trying to get on somebody for something, if you're trying to light a fire under someone, that's really easy to call one of us up and say someone's not working hard. That's an old trick in the book. I mean, it's been used by managers, GMs, agents, other players, backups, that for years now, as long as there's been, newspapers and reporters in the locker room. So, that's just an easy way to characterize it. And I think that, he wouldn't have had the early success that he did without some level of preparation and understanding of kind of how the NFL works at this point.
Staying on the offensive side of the football, I know wide receiver was a bit of a mess, throughout OTAs and minicamp with the injuries and the drop passes. Did any of kind of the lesser known guys stand out to you? Really, of the guys who were actually playing, there wasn't really any name guys, probably outside of Stephen Hill. So did any of the undrafted free agents or lesser known second year players kind of jump out?
Well, like you said, it's sort of tough to get a handle on that exactly because, for a couple of reasons. I mean, the first reason is that, these are third and fourth and fifth string wide receivers practicing against the starting defense. Timing's off, and a lot of times it's hard for the quarterback to even know, kind of where they are in the route, where they're supposed to be, and so it's kind of hard to tell. But I would say a couple names. I like Marcus Davis. He had one really great catch that really stood out. And then Zach Rogers from Tennessee was one of the crisper route runners. We were standing by the wide receivers, got to see them do a lot of the drills. Definitely one of the crisper route runners that I saw. And then Joe Collins has been around. I've seen him before, but it looks like he's in a little bit better control of his body than he was before. I mean, he's a big guy. He's 6'3", 6'4". So, I mean, if you could do something with that frame, I mean, why not? And it looks like he's actually done a better job kind of getting in control, turning his body back towards the ball, making some catches. So I would say out of the group, I mean, those are kind of your three to watch heading into training camp.
Now, would you say over at tight end, which is another thin position, do you think, just from the way Rex was talking about Kellen Winslow and from everything we read about him, apparently he looked good and he looked healthy, and Rex had that gleam in his eye when he was talking about him. Did he look that encouraging where you would say it's reasonable to expect that there's a chance he could be a big factor on the offense this season?
I don't know about a big factor. I had a few more alarms than maybe some other people did. I kind of waited for him to turn it loose a little bit and have a little bit more of see a little bit more of the speed and kind of what he's got left, and I really didn't see that. I saw a great set of hands. I saw a guy that really wanted to make a roster. He was diving all over the place. Obviously didn't see that speed that he had in 2004, 2005, but not even sure I saw the same kind of speed that he had in 2011 either. But, that might be with time, and there could have been a wink and a nod understanding that he can kind of take this 3/4 speed if they liked him enough. So, I wasn't as high on him as everybody else, but, Rex, I mean, he loves those big-name guys, and he loves those veterans with experience, guys that could do some things, and will really be the biggest benefit for everyone is it's just that he's been in so many offenses before. He understands space. He understands how to get open, and that's really what they're looking for. I mean, I don't think it's, I don't think we're going to have an 80-catch, 75-catch tight end on our hands here, but, I think he'll be productive if he can stay healthy.
Switching over to the defensive side of the ball, obviously they've lost a handful of veterans, throughout the offseason. Outside of, maybe like a David Harris who's, a veteran on that side of the ball, who is kind of stepping up into more of a leadership role now that, Sione Pua's gone, Bart Scott's gone, some of these guys who have been around Rex's teams with the Jets since 2009, which of the younger players is kind of stepping more into that leadership role?
What's interesting about the Jets is it seems like every position group is kind of its own clan. That's sort of what I've come to understand about the team. And every position group's got this, kind of leadership hierarchy sort of thing. And, in talking to the defensive line guys, for example, you lose someone like Sione, you lose somebody like DeVito, and then you sign somebody like Antonio Garay, who, you don't really know exactly how many snaps. I mean, there's a good chance he's a starter too at that position too, but, you don't know how many snaps you're going to get out of him, but he's great. I mean, he's just great with the guys. He's been absolutely everywhere, and he knows everything about the league. He's been cut, he's been re-signed, he's broken his leg, he's been out of the league for a year. And for young guys, that's huge and that's big. So, I mean, that's kind of important. And then if you bump it back to the linebackers, definitely Demario Davis. He kind of took it upon himself to stay taxing with David Harris in the off season. Really wanted to, just make sure that he was involved with everything. And now he's sort of like him and David are sort of pushing each other, which, him and I talked about recently. And that's kind of, I mean, it's good. I mean, you like to see that. And then, obviously, when you go back to the secondary, Cromartie's got those guys out in California with them all summer. So he's not fooling around. I mean, he's got a taste of that Pro Bowl again. And, so I think leadership-wise, they're definitely, they're not far off from where they were last year.
Has there really been a noticeable difference between how Rex is carrying himself, on the field and maybe around the locker room? Is he really that much more hands-on with the defense this season now with Patton gone compared to what he was the last couple of years?
Yeah, but I think Rex always spent a majority of his time with the defense, at least during the course of the practice we were allowed to see. But I think the big change now is, and Rex has been kind of bouncing back and forth, and he's not sure. I mean, is he supposed to be more of a head coach? What does he do? Where should he go? But last year he was in a ton of offensive meetings. He was trying to learn the offense. I mean, I remember last year he was telling me that he didn't know how to draw a play the way that an offensive coordinator can draw a play going into last year. And so that was kind of just his way of getting back to his roots and saying, hey, this is what me and this is what I can do. But this year, I mean, he's been in all the defensive meetings. I mean, the defense is going to be his baby, and I think that's, it's going to work for him for two reasons. One, this is what he did in 2009. The Jets kind of took off and they had the success in his first year. And two, I mean, if this thing goes down and, Rex ends up getting the boot, I mean, he's going to walk right into a great defensive coordinator position somewhere because, he'll still have that top 10 defense and he'll have the word out that, he's still the guy and he's been in all the defensive meetings and it's his defense. So, I mean, from that perspective, it's sort of a win-win for him.
All right. Just one final question here. On either side of the ball, who do you think has the ability to kind of surprise people? Who do you think is kind of flying under the radar? When people just talk about the 2013 Jets, who do you think is going to kind of come out of nowhere to put together a big year? Last year, it ended up being really Jeremy Curley on offense, mostly because of circumstances, with the injuries around the offense. But, who's that guy going to be this year, whether it's on offense or defense?
On offense, I think if you're assuming that everybody stays healthy and stays upright, I mean, I really think that Chris Ivory's got a chance to have a good year. Good in terms of just with expectation. I mean, like I could see him having, anywhere from 650 to 800 yards, a couple touchdowns. But the Jets, I mean, how often have you seen that kind of production out of your second and third running backs? But, I mean, I think he's finally that true power back with a little bit of a mix of explosion that they're looking for. Sean Green sort of lacked that a little bit, and I think that's going to be a great option for them. And on defense, I would probably have to say Josh Bush for now because he's a lot smarter than people give him credit for. That's I know that they were really high on him going into the draft, and they knew about him before he even kind of showed up there. And so I would expect those two guys to sort of make a name for themselves this year.
All right, man. Again, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on, and we'll definitely be following your work all year leading up to training camp. Any specific articles we should tell the people to be looking out for?
Nothing in particular, but, to get the word out, on NJ.com, our Jets page, I mean, we redid everything. There's a lot of great, fan forums. I'm always in there chatting with everybody. I'm in the comment section talking to everybody, and that's what I love to do. So if anybody's ever has any questions, anything like that, they want to see more or less of something, we're always accessible. So head on over and check it out.
All right, thanks again, and everybody make sure to give Conor a follow on Twitter at ConorTOR. All right, and we are now back with our third guest from our staff at Turn on the Jets, Michael Tiny Nolan. Ironically enough, Tiny's also one of my good friends. We actually hosted a radio show together back in college at Muhlenberg, the very popular, very well-known WMUH for all you Allentown, Lehigh Valley listeners out there. Tiny, he's on our site as Mike Nolan. I got to call him Tiny. That's what I call him. How you doing tonight, buddy?
Good. How you doing, Joe?
I'm doing good.
Hey, you didn't tell the people out there how we got completely sandbagged, though, with our show.
This is actually true. We were co-hosting originally a show with a bunch of other people, and we finally sat down as seniors in college to record our own show. Went in the studio, put the headsets on, put down an epically good hour of sports radio.
An hour? You sure it wasn't about 10 hours? Had to be 10 hours.
Maybe it was 10 hours. I think we were in there all day, and it's like that. The tape got lost. Maybe it was so good they lost the tape on purpose, but. If that tape ever kicks up around the campus at Muhlenberg, please contact one of us because we would love to hear it.
Well, two guys who wanted to host the show but couldn't do it because they weren't that good ended up getting the show because they stole our tape and they put their own tape in, and since they were the only tape around, they got the show.
It was robbery. There should be like an oral history about that tape, like on Grantland, like one of these upcoming years. I could see the article already.
I'm still bitter.
Very bitter. Anyway, let's start out talking about some of the offensive linemen you broke down. We've kind of unfortunately pigeonholed you to being our offensive line film expert and Morty Morningway expert, since you are a Philly guy and very experienced with Morningway, and also a former All-American collegiate offensive lineman at college football powerhouse Muhlenberg, of course. Let's start with the first article you wrote a while back. Let's talk about Willie Colon, a guy the Jets signed on a 1-year deal to step in at the guard position. Guy who had experience at tackle, but had moved over to guard recently in his career. What should a Jet fan expect out of Colon if he's healthy this season?
If he's healthy, I absolutely love the signing. I actually think it's probably a step up from Brandon Moore. As right tackle for the Steelers, he probably should have been a Pro Bowler at some point between 06 and 09. Started, I believe, 50 straight games for them at right tackle, and was ranked as one of the best pass pro right tackles in the game, and actually was, I think Pro Football Focus had him ranked as the third best tackle in the game in, I believe it was 09. So he was an absolute stud for the Steelers at right tackle. And then I believe it was his Achilles injury that kind of really did him in. And over the last 3 years in his Steelers career, he started left guard about 12 games. He had an Achilles injury that took him out for an entire year. And he tore a tricep that took him out for about half a year. But what I've seen on film, if he's healthy, this dude is a powerhouse. The Steelers ran a lot of power stuff and counter stuff, a lot of gap scheme run plays where he was kind of able just to completely barrel down on an unsuspecting lineman, and you could see how strong he was by putting a lot of guys on their back. I think when I did my film breakdown, I took a game from 09 where he was going up against the Ravens defensive front, and actually a couple plays completely dominated Haloti Ngata and moved him probably 2 or 3 yards back, which is pretty much unheard of against that dude. So if he's healthy, you're going to have a guy that's definitely lost a step because of his Achilles injury from 09. He's lost a step, but he still has that power that can really can get him out of a lot of jams, especially when he puts himself in bad situations with his footwork. So I really do expect him to step right in and start at left guard, and be a nice combo with Nick Mangold. I think inside you could have a lot more strength than what you've had in the past there at the Jets O-line.
Yeah, I think this is an offense that's going to have to rely heavily on their running game, and I think hand in hand with Chris Ivory staying healthy, the Jets need Colon to stay healthy, where they could really get something going with their inside running game behind Mangold. And Colon, like you said, looking over at the other guard position, basically I think it's breaking down to being a two-man battle. It's either going to be a rookie third-round pick Brian Winters or Steven Peterman, kind of a journeyman veteran the Jets just signed from Detroit in a minimum contract. I know you've just started looking at some Peterman film and you did a full breakdown of Winters. Do you think Winters has the skill set to start from day one as a third-round rookie?
I think he absolutely has a skill set, and honestly, he probably would have been a second-round pick, possibly higher in the third round, if he went to a bigger school and was able to play guard his entire college career. Doesn't really have the skill set to be a left tackle like he played all his entire college career. But what I've seen on film from him is some surprising athleticism. He's an excellent puller. A lot of times they had him pulling from the left tackle spot, and he was fantastic and would get right up in the hole and absolutely mash people. I also like, along the same lines of Colon, is how strong this kid is. Out of all the rookies that I looked at pre-draft, I don't think there was a guy who I felt had a stronger punch from both the pass pro technique and his run blocking. I don't think I saw a guy that had a stronger punch and just pure chest strength and was able to put people on the ground. The one thing he definitely has to work on is his footwork. His strength, his upper body strength is unbelievable. But a lot of times he resorts to some of his wrestling background. I mean, he's a renowned wrestler coming out of high school. A lot of times his feet will get him in a bad spot, and he'll have to resort to some type of wrestling where you might call it creative holding and put people on the ground, which you love that, the physicality of it. You love the physicality. But when he gets to the NFL, it could do him in a little bit. But when you just mentioned Stephen Peterman, I think as a young rookie coming in right now, this guy is ahead of Stephen Peterman. To me, when I watch Peterman, I probably need to watch another game or two to really get a full feel of him. But from what I've seen so far, the first thing I would say is he's a goofy athlete. And a lot of it has to do, he just looks a little goofy on film. And a lot of it has to do with, he's had foot problems his entire career. He hasn't really missed a lot of games because of it, but you can see just watching him sit in a stance that he just looks goofy. I mean, his stance is always cockeyed to the right a little bit, and he has his foot in just a really weird spot. And I think I have to imagine it has to do something with his foot injury history. But he doesn't get a lot of strength behind him, and they ran a lot of zone stuff with the Lions last year, and he really just didn't look comfortable in it at all. So as far as he goes, I really think Winters is probably going to take him over in camp. And the last thing about Peterman is he led the league as far as offensive guards last year in quarterback hurries. And if you just watch 2 or 3 games, I watched the Vikings game. I mean, some of his hurries led right to interceptions, some big negative plays for their offense. And obviously, it's something that you don't want to have when you're talking about Mark Sanchez being back there or a rookie quarterback being back there. You can't have that type of pressure getting through. And I think Winters is just a guy that's probably going to come in and just get better from day one because the thing that he lacks in right now is so obvious that I think that the Jets offensive line coach is going to come right in and basically be able to fix a lot of those things from the get-go because it's so obvious that he just needs some better knee bend and he needs a little bit of footwork. He has explosiveness and he has strength. Those are things you can't teach. So the things you can teach is where Winters lacks. So I think he's just going to have nowhere to go but up, and I think he'll be a day one starter at right guard.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm hoping for. I'd like to see, especially with how young this team is in some areas and how they're kind of rebuilding, I'd like to see Winters kind of just thrown in there and learn on the fly throughout this year and then really be ready to go as an up-and-coming guard, by the time we're, into next season. Just big picture, let's talk about Marty Morningway's offense. You've seen every Eagles game the past, however long Marty Morningway's been there. What are some misconceptions about his offense and what kind of offense he's bringing to the Jets? I think a lot of people just say, oh, West Coast offense, it's going to be, a heavy passing offense with a lot of quick release passing. Is there some things we're kind of missing here?
Well, I mean, you're definitely going to get the things you just mentioned. And again, he's a West Coast guy, so that's at the base of what he wants to do to start off the game. But the two big I wouldn't say misconceptions. It's just, I guess it is a misconception. When you classify his offense as West Coast, you immediately think of the things you just talked about. But when you compare Morningway's offense to a lot of the other West Coast disciples, his run-to-pass ratio is a lot higher. And it's something that was immediately noticed, especially with the Eagles, when Andy Reid was the play caller for Morningway's first several years as the offensive coordinator. Once Morningway took over, because the Eagles were struggling, they began to run the ball a lot more. And it was immediately noticeable the amount of running they were doing. It's really kind of where Westbrook and LaShawn McCoy especially kind of had their best years, where when Morningway was calling the plays. So that's the one thing. The other thing is they are going to take those short passes and some of those route combinations over the middle to get things going. But he's going to take a lot more shots than I think a lot of people are used to seeing in the West Coast offense. And that's just the nature of the NFL these days. You kind of have to evolve with the NFL. So he takes a lot more shots than I remember seeing from some of the older West Coast offense guys. I mean, me and you have talked extensively about that play with Deshaun Jackson going deep on LaRon Landry against the Redskins a couple years ago. he's going to take shots, and he might not necessarily set them up with a lot of the West Coast stuff. But he's going to take a lot of deep shots and try and hit his home runs when he can.
Yeah, I think when you say something like that, it makes me think, first off, of Chris Ivory. You know, we assume with how the personnel the Jets have, they're going to be a run-heavy offense, and I've got some questions on Twitter saying, oh, well, Morningway, he's going to shy away from running the ball a lot. He's going to want to throw. But I think he's smart. He's going to look at his personnel and say, hey, I have a lot of talent at running back, you know, comparatively, not so much at tight end, receiver, and quarterback. He's not going to hesitate certain weeks to give Ivory the 20, 25 carries he needs and, you know, get Mike Goodson involved behind him. And then when it comes to taking shots down the field, I mean, really, that would fall on Stephen Hill. He's really the deep threat on the Jets roster. Now he has a ways to go in terms of route running and catching the ball consistently. But, you know, one thing I also want to mention about the receiver position, and this is pending Santonio Holmes being healthy. Again, everybody kind of assumes that Holmes has to be the flanker, Hill has to be the split end. Those have to be the starting receivers. They should be playing the bulk of the reps. When really, without question right now, Jeremy Curley is the second best overall receiver on the roster. And I don't think people understand that the Jets could run a system where really Curley and Holmes are the starting receivers and Hill is more of a situational player used as a deep threat. I mean, Macklin and Jackson started. Neither of them were big guys. I mean, size-wise, wasn't Avant, you know, kind of bigger than both of them, and he played situationally as a third down receiver, where my main point being that Morningway's not going to hesitate to have Holmes and Curley on the field at the same time. I mean, is that something that you agree with and could see?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think right off the bat, I think if in your base personnel, if your base personnel is a two-receiver set, I think Holmes and Curley are going to be out there. And the beautiful thing about Stephen Hill, though, is I don't think Morningway's ever had a receiver that has that kind of size in his entire career. I mean, so that's a new weapon for him. If he can get him to run some good routes, he can really utilize him as a deep threat, too, once he starts setting some things up. But I think it's a great point that Holmes and Curley could possibly play that Jackson Macklin role in his offense. And obviously, Jackson and Macklin were on a downslope the last year or two. So hopefully they won't play that role, but maybe about 3 years ago, Jackson and Macklin, that would be a nice duo to have out there with Holmes and Curley, and they certainly have the skill set to do it, to pull it off.
Well, I agree. Well, Tiny, I know we could talk about this stuff for hours here, but you know we do have a time limit here. But we're definitely going to get you back on before the season comes around. What should the writers be looking for? What is your next kind of article or two that you want to focus on? I know we were talking about you doing a weekly series in season where you're going to actually be grading out how the offensive linemen perform.
Well, yeah, I was definitely thinking about in season, kind of doing. I'm actually an offensive line coach on the side, so I grade out my kids after every game. So I was thinking about running a weekly article during the season of something similar with the Jets offensive line, kind of giving them grades as if I was the coach, even though I have no idea what they're exactly being taught at practice, but I'll try and assume. So I was thinking of doing something like that, and I was thinking about kicking it off sometime before training camp with kind of going through the 2012 tape and kind of trying to give the individual offensive linemen a grade on how they performed in 2012. I mean, I don't know if it would mean anything for Slaughter or Moore, but at least the three guys that are returning and some of the other guys at depth, you know, it would be something interesting to look at to see how they really perform from more of a coach's standpoint as opposed to hearsay around the league and what people are just kind of saying. Like, you know, a lot of people don't realize Brick and Mangold are good offensive linemen because people just say that around the league. You know, when do you really actually watch what they're doing on an every play basis to see if they're really as good as people say they are and as their reputation is? So I think that might be something interesting to kick it off, and then maybe when the season rolls around, do that on a weekly basis.
Yeah, I think that would be a great series of articles and something our readers will definitely be looking forward to. Everybody make sure to give Mike a follow on Twitter. He's at Nolan_NFL. Actually, me, Mike, and a couple of our other friends are actually heading out to Chicago tomorrow for the 4th of July holiday. So feel free to tweet us any suggestions on places we need to see. It's actually our first time heading out to Chicago. Is it the Windy City?
Especially places to eat.
Especially places to eat. Is it the Windy City? We've been confused about it. We've called it the Electric City, the City of Brotherly Love, the Motor City.
It's the Motor City. It's Motor City.
Is it the Motor City, right?
I think so, yeah.
It's one of those things out there. Send us some suggestions. Nolan_NFL. Give him a follow. Thanks for joining us, Mike, and I will see you tomorrow at LaGuardia Airport.
Yeah, I'll be holding hands with you on the flight because I'll be nervous tomorrow.
All right, man. We'll talk to you later. See you tomorrow.
All right, buddy. Thanks for having me.
All right, that was our last guest, Mike Nolan of TurnOnTheJets.com. Want to thank him. Want to thank our co-host Mike O'Connor for popping in, and of course also Conor Orr of the Star Ledger. We're going to wrap up here. Something I want to do at the end of every show moving forward. Just going to answer a couple of your questions off Twitter. I kind of hesitated on sending out this tweet today. I should have sent it out earlier, but I did get a few in right here before the show started. So we got Boots McGinnis, at Boots McGinnis, who asked me, which second-year player do you expect to make the most improvement this year? Really good question, and a lot of candidates for this, considering the Jets draft class. I mean, I'm going to take the safe answer and go with Quentin Coples. I think he's a guy who had 5.5 sacks last year and led the team despite only playing 47% of the snaps. He's going to be the team's primary pass rusher this season. He's going to be moved all over the place. I think he could be a guy who ends up with 11 to 12 sacks this year and is really going to be a big X factor on the Jets defense. Obviously, Demario Davis is another guy to keep an eye on, and there's a lot of positive hype surrounding him. I just think Coples will be more of a impact player for the team this season. Moving on, CZ, with a Twitter handle, it's a little long and complicated for me to pronounce, asked, besides our much upgraded running attack, where else do you see our offense putting up points from? Terrific question, and one that I'm not sure anybody, even people inside the Jets building, have an answer for right now. I would say the only sure thing in the Jets passing game right now is Jeremy Curley. I mean, Santonio Holmes isn't healthy yet. Stephen Hill isn't healthy yet and hasn't been consistent. Tight end, we're looking at Cumberland. Is he ready to play a bigger role more consistently? Is Winslow healthy? Quarterback's a question mark, of course. So all we got is Curley, a guy who was very, very good last year and a guy who is talented enough to be more than just a pure slot receiver, which people love to pigeonhole him as. He's going to be a guy who's going to be able to catch a lot of passes in space, a lot of short passes where he can run after the catch. I think he's on deck for a better year than most people expect. I think he's going to play more than people expect, and I think if Holmes and Hill aren't healthy or aren't consistent, he could end up, leading this team in receptions for the second year in a row. One last question before we wrap it up. Dr. E. Stat asked, what exactly has Mark Sanchez shown in practice so far that gives Jet fans any hope he can be a serviceable option at QB? In practice, the reports have been kind of up and down. I think, Conor alluded to him still being respected and liked around the locker room. And again, we try not to get too wrapped up about what these guys do on the practice field. Mark Sanchez could have the greatest July and August of his life. It only matters how he plays in September when the real games start. I haven't completely written off Sanchez yet. I've been a Sanchez apologist the past couple of years. I think there's NFL quarterback talent there. We've seen it in a big spot. It would not surprise me if Sanchez started week one. It would not surprise me if Geno Smith started week one. I think it's really wide open as of right now, and it's going to come down to who plays well in the preseason. It's going to be very, very interesting to watch going forward how this quarterback situation shakes out because Sanchez was just so erratic last year. That's going to be it for this week. We're definitely going to come back to this segment next week where we try to answer some of your questions towards the end of the show. And make sure everyone stays with us at TurnOnTheJets.com. We've had a full week of content. We had 2 new articles today, including a really interesting one from Dan Marcus breaking down the Jets' pass defense numbers without Darrelle Revis and how that will project for this year. Tomorrow we'll be running our roundtable, and we will keep content updated throughout the holiday weekend. So everyone enjoy their 4th of July, get some solid barbecuing in, have a couple beers, relax, and we'll be back with you next week.
This has been a presentation of the Pro Football Central Network. For news, blogs, highlights, and more, log on to ProFootballCentral.com.